Harboring superpower ambitions demands geopolitical assertion that sees no right or wrong. Correct. There's no right or wrong in geopolitics. India's neighbors are more nuisance than help for us. Do you think our ambitions could get a shot in the arm if we annexed neighboring nations that went against us once? We become a double-digit trillion-dollar economy, means a $10 trillion economy. That would also effectively convey a message to less than friendly nations to not mess with India. Thank you. Look, you cannot learn how to sprint before you learn how to walk. So the first order of business is to reach the $10 trillion mark, GDP. Yeah. Once you do that, I do not see any need to annex neighboring nations. Let's look at the geography of the Indian subcontinent. Which are the nations that have historically been part of India? We have Pakistan, Afghanistan, yes, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, and yeah, thereabouts. Yeah. So the question is, will our superpower ambitions get a shot in the arm if we annex neighboring nations? Does India have superpower ambitions? What is a superpower? How do you define a superpower? Here's how I define a superpower. In my definition, a superpower is a nation that has control more or less over the entire world, and a nation that can intervene militarily anywhere in the world at 30 to 60 minutes notice. Does India want to be that sort of nation, a global hegemon? I don't think India wants to be a global hegemon. India should obviously be the major, most powerful economy in the world, which has always been the historical position of India. Historically, India has always been the number one economy in the world. India needs to regain that status of the largest economy in the world. And if you are the largest economy in the world, you need the means to be able to protect and safeguard that, which means India needs to have a massive military that is proportional to its economic might. And if India becomes the biggest economy in the world, then India should also be the biggest military in the world. But that doesn't mean, so if you do that, then India will have to secure supply chains and trade routes and all that, which means that India will have to expand its military footprint, especially navally. In other ways, India will have to have a much larger air force, larger navy to safeguard all those supply chains, trade routes in other nations, nations that supply materials and all those things. So India's economic and military and naval and air force footprint will need to grow proportionate to its economy. But that doesn't require annexing neighboring nations. Let's talk about, let's say, Sri Lanka. Will India need to annex Sri Lanka in the future? I don't think so. I don't think so. Sri Lanka is anyway a friendly neighboring nation. We have more or less the same culture, same everything, just like Nepal. Why can't we have the kind of relationship we have with Nepal? We don't need to annex Nepal. We have an open border with Nepal. The people of Nepal have the right to come to India and live in India as long as they want and work in India as long as they want. They essentially have almost the same rights as Indian citizens and vice versa. The only thing is that the Nepalese cannot vote in Indian elections. But the Nepalese people have the right to serve in the Indian armed forces, because we see Nepal as the same people as us and the same nation, more or less. The same people, the same heritage as us. We could have a similar relationship with Sri Lanka. Why not? Without having to actually annex the nation. So we could create, like they have the EU with open borders, we could create a subcontinental union similar to that, and maybe expand it beyond to other friendly nations. Maybe in the future we could add Myanmar and Thailand and Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam to that, maybe even Indonesia, and so on. We can think of it in that manner. So without actually annexing other nations, we can integrate those nations with our economy and have more or less open borders with friendly nations. Hopefully even westwards in the future. Hopefully in the next 100 years, even with what is now Pakistan, what is now Afghanistan, and maybe even with our real neighbors, the Parsis, the Iranians, we could have that once things are better in the world. Yeah. So I would say India needs to raise its economic might. India needs to, maybe in the next 50 years, become the world's largest economy, which will necessitate India to have the world's largest military and most powerful military as well. And we can use that military for good instead of using it for bullying other nations and creating vassal states. We can use it for actual good in the world. That's what India has always been. India has always been a force of good rather than evil. India has never been a colonizer. India has always given more than it has taken. It has never taken anything from other nations. So that's what India should aspire to be, instead of becoming a new bully like the Americans, like the Anglo-Saxon Empire. Saxon Empire, or like what the Chinese wish to be. We could be a force for good, but be the largest force in the world. So that's how I see our future foreign policy once we become a significant military and economic power. That's the kind of superpower India should aim to be, not a hegemon, but a force for good.